6 o'clock. There we go. We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to live show number 5. I'm your creative academic, Dr. Jess, and you probably clicked on the link today because you just want to sleep better. So do I. So I'm very excited that on this week, the National Sleep Awareness Week, we get to hang out with none other than the good sleep doctor herself, Dr. Shelby Harris. Hi, Doc.
Hi, it's very nice to speak with you and meet you really formally. So thank you.
Yeah.
I can talk sleep all day long. So
yeah, and this is a busy week for you, so it's a really big deal that we have you. So, before we go any further, I need to give you your flowers because you are a busy bee. You have worked so hard and you've done so much, and I just want to scratch the surface a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. So, for those of you listening, Dr. Shelby is a psychologist and sleep specialist based in New York. She's board certified to treat a wide variety of sleep, anxiety, and depression issues, and she has both market and academic experience. And those two buckets have made her a favorite in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Washington Post, CBS Mornings, the Today Show, Good Morning America, and my girl Drew, the Drew Barrymore Show. But I call her my girl Drew. We know each other from Adam. But the biggest thing I have in common with Drew Barrymore is when I get really into an episode or a talk, I'm leaning into the camera more, and that is peak Drew energy. She leans in so I go through. So I my heart leaped when I saw that on the list. So
that was a fun one. That was definitely a highlight.
Yes. And kind of sleep related, but not really. Correct me if I heard this wrong. I feel like I heard you say you've done 20 marathons.
23.
20. You've run 26.2 miles, 42 kilometers, 23 times. Yeah. So we get to hear from someone who knows the importance of rest for the body, right? Who can quite literally run the run, not walk the walk. That was right there.
Walk the walk, talk the talk. There you go.
That is amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. That is wild. So I do want to hear about the marathons, and if that goes into the sleep story, please tell us. But here at Soluna, we love a good, professional journey. Like, how did you get to where you are? In my imagination, you just had a really good nap one day, and you were like, everybody needs this, right? But there's obviously so much more there. So can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey?
Yeah. So I was actually a really horrible sleepwalker as a kid.
Sleepwalker. Okay.
Yeah. So to the point when I was 8, 9 years old, I would get I grew up in Rhode Island, and we had a just traditional colonial house, and I got up in the middle of the night and would walk from my bedroom down the stairs and into the kitchen. And we had an alarm, and I set off the alarm a few times because I was trying to leave the house. I had no recollection of the going downstairs. All I remember is setting off the alarm and my dad having a bat, thinking there was a robber in the house.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, but when I went to sleepaway camp, which was a big thing there, I'd go to sleepaway camp. I always had to have the bottom bunk. There were certain precautions that I always had to take. I eventually outgrew it, which happens most of the time with sleepwalking.
Okay.
But I was always like, why did I do these crazy things in my sleep? And just interested in it, not scared, but more interested in the whole idea. And then there were a few parts that kind of fit together in my life. So I went to Brown University as an undergrad.
Okay.
And while I was there was a really popular course called Sleep 101 that I actually didn't take, but I sat in on one of the classes, and I was like, this is actually really interesting. I should have taken it. And little did I know it was by this very famous adolescent and young adult sleep researcher, Mary Carskadden, who's a giant in the field. I was just silly. But then I I took a year off before going to graduate school. I was a music major. I played the upright bass, and I also was
a no way. Are you
serious? I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I was like, do I want to play in orchestras or do I want to go to psychology? So I took a year off, and while applying to graduate school, I worked at night in orchestras, and during the day did med school research. And that was what solidified it for me. They put me on a research study where I was going into rehab centers for alcoholism for people in early recovery. We're talking weeks in for their alcoholism. And what the study was, at the time we were using medication called trazodone. Now they do these studies with behavioral treatments, believe it or not. And it was trying to see if we help people sleep better early on in recovery, they actually would have a lower risk of relapse because a lot of people go back to drugs and alcohol because they're not sleeping.
That's
So
so interesting. Yeah.
it was fascinating. We're talking like 2000, 99, 2000. And there, but that was all that we were talking about. It was like in the sleep disorder, psychiatric disorder world. We weren't talking about sleep and wellness and sleep and all these.
Right.
I went to graduate school, talked about insomnia, and then I found there aren't many sleep places to really get training. So I found one that had it. And then I worked at a sleep center at Montefiore and I stayed there and they trained me as well. And it kind of just all fit together from there.
Oh, that's incredible. Like there were like three different things you said that I'm like, I have questions.
Not me at any point.
I'll pick one. So with your experience of sleepwalking, you said you were younger. Were these what we would call your couth years? Because a lot of our users are between 13 and 25.
Yeah.
So what were those sleepwalking years for you, the age?
So it was younger. It was about 6 to 11 or 12. But some people don't outgrow them as much. And if you're someone who had sleepwalking episodes, but then started having them again, the first thing we always try to make sure that you're on point with is, which we can talk about, is like sleep hygiene and making sure you're getting enough sleep, because people who are sleep deprived tend to have a higher risk of sleep disorders and sleepwalking.
Yes.
But if you're someone who didn't have it as a kid and you're now like 19, 20 and out of nowhere you start having sleepwalking episodes, definitely see a doctor just to make sure there's nothing else going on. Even things like medications can make people sleepwalk. So you just want to make sure you're safe about it.
Yeah. There's I don't know, I can't remember if it was a TikTok or forever ago, this person started reporting their sleepwalking. And it can be some of the funniest stuff, but I guess when you're watching, it's funny. Yeah. When you're experiencing it, not so much.
I think she's very famous. My sister sent them to me. I was looking
really funny.
And some of us are like, I'm with like some of my colleagues in sleep medicine. We're like, is this real? Is this not? We can't tell. There are actually people who specialize in like forensic sleep medicine who can tell whether someone's faking or not when they've done things in their sleep.
Oh, I want to hear that.
It's pretty genius.
It's hilarious. So we have actually a poll from our users where we try to hear a little bit about their sleep habits. I want to get your thoughts on these. So we'll have the poll come up in a second. We were asking them basically what keeps you up at night. And so if you can, as you can see, it's kind of an interesting distribution. So a whopping 80% said stressing over school, work, life. That keeps them up at night. We have 18% saying that scrolling through their phone keeps them up, 2% saying watching shows. And I was genuinely surprised at the 0% playing video games. And I'm sure we can do a little bit of research and analyzing to see what could have fed into that. But just wanted to get your initial thoughts on this. Do you see this distribution in your practice?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this looks like what I see day in and day out, but I would add that the scrolling on the phone and the watching shows are usually combined. So people are putting the show on in the corner and then they're scrolling through whatever it is else they're looking at. So
yeah, I gotta tell you, whenever that function happened, I had to be one of the first people that discovered it, because it like I do it so easily. My goodness, like sometimes it's like rewatching a show, so I don't need to focus on it. So I'm just playing some game or whatever. But that is, I absolutely agree. I would combine the 2 and 3. That's so interesting.
And it's also but many people aren't necessarily like the younger and younger patients I'm working with. They don't have TVs in their room anymore, so it's always everything's on the phone. So it's using the phone.
So speaking of younger people, some of our research showed that Gen Zs get less than 7 hours, and really about 35% of them get more than 7 hours of sleep. It feels like, it feels like saying social media and doom scrolling is the kind of the low hanging fruit, right? For like, that's the reason. I absolutely agree that could be part of the reason, but we also have 60% saying finances are a source of anxiety, and that affects sleep. So in your practice, how much does doom scrolling actually come up as as a factor into getting good sleep and getting enough sleep, really?
I think it factors in a lot. There are two sets of patients that I'm seeing more and more. It used to be more classic insomnia patients where you just can't fall asleep no matter what you're doing. And a lot of those patients over the years, they would be on their phone, but it was more like they're just looking because they can't sleep. right? So
Okay.
they're just kind of scrolling. Now I'm
Yeah.
seeing more people who are like, I can't make the time for sleep. That's what people call revenge bedtime procrastination. They're like so busy from the day that they're now trying to steal back time at night. Those are the people who I think are doom scrolling and just kind of like doing whatever, just mindlessly at night, because sometimes they're getting in the way of the amount of sleep that you're getting.
Yeah. Could you repeat that term you just said? Revenge
Bedtime procrastination. It is a new term, but a age-old issue. I wrote about it in my book, and it was like 27. I called it momsomnia because it was a lot of moms that'd be up like scrolling and stuff like that.
Yeah, because all day has been for their kids, and
I want to watch my shows that I never get time to watch. But it's an age-old problem. We just want to steal back the time for ourselves, and so what gets sleep.
Yeah, and now that we have tech, it's almost like this pacifier for adults that that can help do that. Oh my goodness, I'm learning so much. I'm loving this. I wish I could take notes while talking on these live shows. I can't quite. So let's go back to the recording. But this is so great. So in my TikTok snooping, I call it research, but it's really just snooping on your content. You have this video where you're talking about the unseen threats to your sleep. Could you unpack that for us a little bit?
Unseen threats to my sleep. So there's a lot of things that could be someone's revenge scroll everything. So there are a lot of things that could happen to your sleep that people just don't realize. So it could be things like medical issues, right? Sleep apnea is super, super common. So a lot of people will have breathing issues or snore a little bit, and we see it more and more in younger people. Could have things like restless legs. There's a lot of medical things that get missed. Medications that you're taking. Some of the antidepressants can cause insomnia in people. And then there's things like your room temperature, someone who's sleeping next to you, if there's anyone next to you, how dark your room is. There are a lot of things that can influence your sleep that you don't necessarily know are influencing it.
Yeah. Okay. I have a little silly story about like what turned out to be an unseen threat to my sleep. So this was a couple days old. I have this humidifier that I keep in my office, and it has like the occasional bubble sound, like the but it's the office. I'm awake. It's not really thinking about it. So one day I was like, oh, the air in the bedroom is kind of dry. I'm just gonna move this over. So I move it over, and I'm asleep. It's like the middle of the night. I would like to think I was in REM sleep. I don't think so, because I actually heard it, and I hear this like sound, right? So I wake up on edge and unsettled, but I'm not thinking, oh, humidifier. I'm thinking, did my husband just fart?
Right.
And do I need to wake him up to go to the bathroom because I can't do this again? So I'm trying to go back to sleep, but I'm on edge because of this weird sound that just jolted me awake.
Yeah.
And it happens again, and I like wake up and I wake him up. I'm like, do you need to go to the bathroom? And poor guy is just confused because woken him up asking if he needs to go to the bathroom. He's not a child, he's fine. So I saw that the video about the unseen threats to your sleep, and I realized, sound that I'm not used to, because I was on edge for the rest of the night. And so the next day I kept the humidifier in my room, and the next day that sound happened. I'm like, oh, my body's still not used to this. I don't think I can keep this in here. And so I moved it back. But I wonder also the use of the bedroom, right? So and I want to pick your brain on this. How can we best optimize our bedrooms, like with sound, light, all that, to make sleep just better?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that you want to think about your bedroom as like a cave. Ideally a welcoming cave, right? One that you want to be in. So when we think of a cave environment, right, where we would sleep fine many, many years ago, presumably, it's quiet, it's dark. That's key. Darkness. It's cool. That the temperature thing, a lot of people don't focus enough on. So cool. And then I always like to add in, although a cave isn't really that way, comfortable. So a lot of people are sleeping on the cheapest mattress you can find. And there are really inexpensive mattresses out there that you can get that are better quality. So really don't just, use any old mattress that's 20, 30 years old. You want to make sure your bedding is comfortable at whatever price point you can afford, and that your pillows and mattress and everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay. I really need to think about the temperature piece, because sharing a home with someone, like, where our bodies are just kind of different, right? So like we have to compromise.
Cooler is better. So you want to try, and there are some people like you just live in an apartment building. Like I'm in Manhattan, and a lot of people have like heat that they can't control. And I just remember it with like the steam heat would come on super high, and you're hot. So we sleeping with the window open. But you really want to keep it ideally somewhere in, for the majority of people, somewhere in the mid to upper 60s.
Okay,
is really key. That being said, if you have a different thermostat than your other significant other, make it cooler and get extra bedding, like twin size bedding for your side of the bed. You can sleep with socks on. They make really great tech for one side of the bed that you can cool or warm up that side of the bed. There's a lot of options out there so that both of you don't need to, or one of you doesn't have to suffer at the expense of the other.
Yeah, I really like those, I've heard of those beds with the different temperature size, but for those of us who can't quite afford that yet, I like the idea of the sheets.
Well, what I actually did, my mom, I'm throwing my mom under the bus. She has this thermostat internally there. She needs to have it really hot all the time. So when we go up there to visit in Rhode Island over the summer, she won't put on the air conditioning. It's like 80 degrees and humid, and like my whole family were like, oh. So I got to the point where I said, we're only going to stay here if we can use the air conditioning. I'll pay for it, whatever. But I bought her a heated blanket. So you can buy ones for like $40, $50 online. And that way she had a nice warm blanket on her. And that works really well if you're someone who wants it.
Oh, that's smart. Look at that. Putting a degree to work at home.
There you go.
So I can keep going with questions forever, but I want to give a chance to anyone in the chat who might have some questions. Please drop them. I'm very curious. While we're waiting for that to come up, I did want to ask about melatonin use, right? So for some of us, or actually, well, more directly, since it requires no prescription, can it be part of early intervention? Because you can just go into a store. Are there things that you recommend to try before then going to melatonin?
So here's the take on melatonin. So melatonin, first of all, you don't need a prescription in the United States.
Oh,
I
didn't know that.
This should be enlightening. In most other countries, you need a prescription for melatonin.
That is very telling.
Very telling. And I just learned that in Europe, or at least in England, you have to be an adolescent psychiatrist to prescribe it to anyone under the age of 18. So it is much more regulated in other countries because it is a hormone that your brain naturally makes when the sun goes down and stays down. So it's marketed as an appetite supplement or as like something like that, like a nutritional supplement. It's not, it's a hormone. So in the United States, there have been like 2 or 3 studies that came out that showed that it's not regulated by the FDA. So they looked at like 10 gummy bottles over the summer. It came out, and it was like some had no melatonin in it, some had 250% more melatonin than was marketed. Some didn't have any melatonin and had CBD in them. Like there's no regulation. So when it comes to melatonin for insomnia, if you have trouble sleeping multiple nights a week for weeks on end, melatonin is hit or miss whether it works, believe it or not. It's not a good treatment for that. So we actually recommend most of the time doing cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which is my area of specialty. 2 to 8 sessions works really well with young adults. I use it all the time in my practice. Very quick behavior focused sessions, and that can often help sleep. And if that's not enough, then we talk about potential in melatonin or medication or other treatments. But the other thing to consider with melatonin is that it's not a bad thing to take once in a while. We use it more for jet lag and shift work issues, honestly. But we use tiny doses, like 0.5 milligram. There are people who are using 10 milligrams of melatonin because you can buy that. That is way too much. So if you're someone that wants to try it once in a while, it's fine as long as your doctor is fine with it. But higher than 5 milligrams. Any more than that is actually a really big dose of melatonin. They should not be marketing that.
Oh my goodness, you heard it here, y'all. Just because it's in Walmart doesn't mean you have to get it.
And just because it's over the counter doesn't mean it doesn't have side effects.
Right.
So people are often very sleepy and drowsy when they get up in the morning on it. Not everyone. And the other big thing that no one really knows about is that melatonin can cause vivid dreams and nightmares for a lot of people. So,
I have experienced that. I did not want to connect it to melatonin, but there's a part of my head that was like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a very common issue. If I have someone come to me with nightmare disorder and we're going to treat the nightmares and I find out they're on melatonin, first thing we always do is stop it.
Yep. Yeah. We had a question pop up. Thank you. There we go. So this is a question from one of our listeners. Since tech/screen seems to have messed up my whole generation's sleep schedule, that part, could it be better for us to find an alternative to the traditional 9 to 5 schedule?
When you say for us, do you mean for your generation, for work, and that, like, that's, so if it's for, in general, the way that we like, that's like a newer area that we're thinking about more in sleep medicine, is your circadian clock. So there are a lot of people who are also, if you're, and I also don't know your age. So if you're in your early 20s, screens can be an impact, but there was also this natural like delay in sleep wake timing that happens in adolescents and young adults. So a lot of times we talk about like leaning into your circadian pattern. If you're a night owl, if you're an early bird, any of those issues, like if you just lean into it and find a job that's allowing of that pattern, we can't say you have a circadian disorder because it's your sleep timing works on that schedule.
Yeah.
So like in relationships, there can be people with 2 different sleep times, and you just have to find a way to make it work. Because if you try to force it into something that's not biological, you can do it. I do it all the time with patients. It's just not easy.
Yeah.
So 8 to 5 schedule would work for some people, but I think, there are a lot of people who can't get to work for 9 a.m. physically because they're so sleepy. That those are the people that come to me for treatment, and we treat them so they can be on a 9 o'clock. So it'd be nice to not have such a fixed schedule, but the reality is in our world, there are certain professions that need that. And
speaking of the sleep wake times, daylight savings just hit us again. Completely caught me off guard. I forgot my phone just had a different time than my alarm. Like, oh shoot, that happened. Do you see this affecting people's or your patients' patterns, like sleep patterns or even behavioral patterns?
100%. So daylight saving, just my quick take on that is we need to get rid of it. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine. They have a whole position statement. Now it's not to stay in daylight saving. It's to stay in whatever we fall back to. That's called standard time. So what we just had up until the time change, we should actually be staying in the standard time year round. It's better for our bodies. You have more light in the morning. I know you don't have as much light at night, but that's good for the younger adults who tend to have trouble falling asleep anyways. That hour lost can really take a number of days to adjust to. It's hard.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. So if I could pick, which obviously I have no authority in this, I have no say, I would like to have more light in the evenings. Just like I'm done with work, I can look outside and still see things.
It's lovely. I mean, like I just, I was doing, my kids have tennis practice later in the day because it's just nice. But the problem with that is that is not aligned with our body's natural circadian pattern. And we are not meant to have the light that late at night to go to bed. And remember, right now, we had light coming out. When I get up at like 6 or 7, we had light starting to come out. And then we had daylight saving, all shifted, and then it was dark again in the morning. And if you think about the winter, if you just stay in that daylight saving nice at night, there are going to be people, like teenagers really suffer. It's going to be dark for hours in the morning. We don't need kids at the bus stop for hours in darkness. It's just not safe.
Well, I didn't even think about the kids at the bus stop part, but yes, like having to literally get up and get ready and have a whole process in the morning and then go outside and it's still dark.
Still dark, exactly. So that's why we're trying to stay in standard time. It'll be a little better.
We had another question pop up that I saw about biphasic sleep. Yes. What is that? And is it good or bad?
So there was a anthropologist. No, I can't. Maybe an anthropologist. A number of years ago, who started. I think he wrote a book. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was this whole thing where he said that in the older times, we're talking like 600, 700 years ago, even going up to like Jefferson and Edison, that they would have this pattern where they would sleep in a chunk, then be up, like say 4 hours, then be up for a few hours in the middle of the night. It's like their second wind and they're getting productive again in the middle of the night. And then another 4-hour chunk of sleep. So 2 phases of sleep. Is it good or bad? So talking about like, we don't do that now. It's also not been proven completely that was a thing, but there are people who do it. Remember, also, you can't do a 9-to-5 job very easily with that.
Right. Yeah.
So it just doesn't fit in our society. It's not a bad thing. It gets to be bad when people are using it as a, like they're doing these 2 chunks, or they're missing one of the chunks, or they're sleeping at different times.
Yeah.
If you do it consistently, this 4, then break, then this 4, that actually is totally fine. It's when you're inconsistent with it, it's a problem.
Okay. I definitely had to do I didn't realize it was biphasic, but I had to do some form of that during my dissertation because I just just the exhaustion during the day, and then having dreams where I'm, like I'm having my dissertation or presenting it during my sleep. So I wake up because I'm like, you have work to do, and then work for some hours and then go back to
I always say, like, if it's not causing any, like, people always ask, like, what's the ideal time to go to bed? Is it bad to go to bed after midnight? If it works for you in your life and you feel fine with it and you don't have any major medical issues that it's causing, you do you. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, so I want to talk about your book a little bit. If we have any more questions, y'all feel free to keep popping them in there. I love these. But you have a book that was published in 2019 called The Women's Guide to Overcoming Insomnia. I found it on Amazon. Y'all, you can get it anywhere. But I was wondering, like, why women? Is there something with our hormones for biologically born women that directly affects our sleep? So why focus on women there?
So when I was writing the book and was approached by the publisher, they were like, let's talk about like a specific population. And they're like, is there one population that you really work with the most? And I actually hadn't really thought about it so much because we were talking a little bit at that time. They were talking about menopause and perimenopause. Now it's like everywhere online and people are talking about it all over. But it wasn't such a thing to talk about so much. So I was trying to think about my population. I realized it was mostly women. And so that's why I wrote the book. And there's a lot of research in there, but there's way more research since then on it. But it's the hormones, or there are a few things. So hormones are a big thing. Women and men, when they're boys and girls, have the same rates of sleep problems. But when girls hit puberty and boys hit puberty, you get your period every month. Guess what? That's when the insomnia really kicks off, and women have it twice as much as men. And so hormones and stress too. We tend to be reactive to stress a lot sometimes.
That is so interesting. So as we're kind of navigating sleep health and now we know to stay away from melatonin unless a doctor prescribes it. When should people see a sleep doctor?
That's a great question. So all the things that are typical sleep hygiene, right? So limiting caffeine within 8 hours of bed, limiting alcohol within 3 hours of bed, trying not to fall asleep with your phone in your face, consistent temperature, all those things. If you've been doing all that stuff for at least 2 weeks, usually I say 2 to 3 weeks, and it's not helping, and you're struggling with getting enough sleep, you can't sleep enough, thumbs up. I do this all the time. The quality of your sleep is problematic. So you might sleep a lot, but you feel like a truck hit you the next day.
Yeah.
Or the timing of it's really off. So you're in real extreme night owl or an early bird or whatever. If there's still issues with that after a few weeks of good sleep hygiene, that's when you see a sleep doctor.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's very good to know. I appreciate that it's not just one thing. It's kind of a collection of things.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we got a question. I do polyphasic sleep. I feel like that works with my ADHD. Ooh, that's good. Is there any relationship in that? So the theory that ADHD people come from hunter ancestors, so they are wired to be alert.
I don't know anything really in sleep medicine about that, but there's a huge like ADHD. I see another question like neurodivergent wanting to know about ADHD and autism. There are higher rates of insomnia in those populations. That's actually, those populations are the ones when we do actually, even in little kids, we use melatonin, but in tiny kids, because there have been shown to be less melatonin in those populations.
Yes.
So yes, for neurodivergent, it can happen, but whether it's because of the hunter-gatherer thing, I don't know. It's actually really interesting.
So if we were to prepare someone who is thinking of coming into the doctor's office, very nervous, like don't know what to expect, because I know I've been there where, it's like, what is the doctor? I kind of get into a performative mode. Like, what's the right thing to say to the doctor and to ask? So if we were to prepare someone to come to your office to need to get some help, what can they expect?
So it depends. So if you're coming to me as a behavioral sleep specialist, so I used to for years work in a sleep lab. I was kind of part of that. Now I'm just in private practice, almost like a psychologist, but focusing mostly on sleep stuff. So if you're going to see me, I always have people do a big intake packet before they see me.
Okay.
You're going to fill out a questionnaire, just a brief questionnaire about your anxiety, depression, sleep. And then I try to have someone fill out like 1 to 2 weeks of a sleep diary. Not the watch data. I don't want that stuff. I want you to write down what time did you get in bed? How long do you think it took you to fall asleep without looking at the clock? So that I have some sleep patterns. So that would be someone visiting me. If you're going to an MD sleep doctor, it's usually you're going to that for often like sleep apnea or movements in sleep and stuff like that. So that doctor will probably have a diary. Many do, not all. They'll have a questionnaire very similar, maybe less on anxiety and depression just because of my area. And those are the doctors that you would go to, although I can refer and give people the info. That's where you would go to that doctor to possibly get a sleep study.
Okay.
And a sleep study does not mean all the time that you're going to have to sleep in a lab with all the wires on you there.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was definitely picturing that.
Well, that is this traditional, that's where I used to work, in a sleep lab. That's the traditional sleep study. But if you're just ruling out basic sleep apnea in a lot of people, they have home sleep studies now. So it's really simple thing. Some of them are just a watch, which is unbelievable, with like a little finger oxygen. Some of them are just an oxygen sensor, a chest band, and a little thing under your nose just to catch your breathing. And so those are really effective for a lot of people. If they're looking at more unusual behaviors or they really want to get a good sense of the apnea, that's when you would see that. But it doesn't mean you're definitely going to do that. And you don't do it on the first day. You don't just show up and have to stay overnight.
Right. If you have me fill in a sleep diary, I tend to be kind of thorough with those. Like I will tell you, I fell asleep and I woke up because my phone was in my hand and slipped out and smacked my face. And so I woke up and realized that I was asleep, but I fell asleep.
And we would have a discussion a week later about how I don't need all that data. Just stop doing it.
Just, the more you have, more data, the better.
Exactly.
Oh, we have another question. So Confetti Kid says, I'm nocturnal, so I work best at night and sleep during the day. Can I train my body to do the reverse? And is it possible or even safe to train my body to do that?
That's a great question. I haven't actually ever had anyone all the years I've been doing this ask if it's safe to do it. So
we have a thinking audience.
I like that you said that. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years. So it is very possible. So if you're someone who really has a reverse pattern it's ideal if you can lean into it, like I was saying, but that's a hard one, right? Those are the people who often go into shift work and work at nights and those kind of jobs. But it can be changed. It's not that it's not safe. You're just modifying it. It's just, I would take the word safe out of it. It's fine to do. People do it all the time. They work jobs that are just out of their natural rhythm. It's hard. That's the word I would put in. So it depends on what we would do, but it would be changing the timing of bedtime. Might take a week to get you to there. Might be staying up all night. And then once you've done it, the hardest part is keeping it at that schedule. So that not having a day where you sleep in or go to bed early or any of that stuff can throw it off. It doesn't mean you can't treat it again. It's just hard to you just have to keep it under control and be tight on it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, speaking of hard things, I'm going to go back to the whole marathon thing because I'm still very much so. You said 23 and I wasn't prepared for that. but you said you started running while you were in the sleep lab and in a sleep lab in grad school or before?
No, it was during I had already been there for like 2 years and that's when I started running. So
okay.
This was after graduate school, internship and fellowship and staying on.
Okay, what was it about running? I mean, that literal Olympic level, like running, that physical movement that has, and even as a sleep professional, and honestly, 23 in my mind right now is a professional marathon runner. Like, what is that? What is the intersection?
Okay, so I'd been there actually a number of years at that point because I remember exactly how old I was. So I was about to turn 30. Okay. And I was working at the sleep center as the sleep therapist. And we had a lot of people who had apnea that was very much weight related. Okay. And so I would see some patients talking about how to treat their apnea using a PAP. And even like my non-apnea patients, I'd say you have to at least move. Like you don't have to go and do crazy things. Just start moving, start exercising. And for some of the patients, we would have to recommend weight loss just because of the apnea, whatever. But I sat there and I was like maybe 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And I didn't exercise. I did not watch anything about like my health anything.
Mhm.
And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said to me, you are going to be close to having type 2 diabetes, and your blood pressure, because I had a lot of unhealthy family members who had like stroke and heart attack and all that stuff. I was kind of going down that road. And that made me start thinking about what I was doing with my health. And then I also started reading literature on patients will listen to their doctor's recommendations if they believe that their doctors are following it.
Yeah.
Same thing. And I realized I was telling my patients to exercise, to take care of themselves in certain ways. And I was just a total hypocrite. So how does that turn into a marathon? I am someone who needs accountability.
Okay.
Exercising when I was starting, I needed something. And so I joined Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They had a team and training program. I fundraised for them. They signed me up for a marathon, and they gave me a coach. And with a group of people, I went from 0 miles to a full marathon, slow, in 10 months.
Wow.
So it can be done. And that was how I spent my 30th birthday. I was running a marathon. And then I just kind of got hooked on it, honestly.
Incredible. Yeah. That is incredible. I mean, just I guess a little thought on around exercise. We have content on our Soluna app where we talk about gentle movements.
Yes.
But yeah, one of our incredible team members has spent so much time going into that, and some of the thoughts or the science around that, because all of our content is based heavily on research. We're finding with exercise, it can be a source of stress. Like you have peaked cortisol especially when you have so many things going on in your life like that. Just go workout mentality actually can worsen things, right? And so I imagine that gentle movement can also go a long way in helping with better sleep.
I say to all of my patients who know that I'm a runner, I say, you do not need to run. You do not need to run marathons. I just do it because I realized I actually had a proclivity towards it.
Right. Yeah.
Like that is not what I would ever recommend to most people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gentle movement. It's just movement. And light exposure is really helpful. And finding something you like. Right? That's the key. It doesn't matter what it is. Just find something you like. I always say that sleep at night is like a battery that's recharging. And if you're not using any of the battery's power during the day, it doesn't need to recharge as much at night. So that's super important to really think about.
That's a good way to put it. So we have a question from Andy Klein. What's the relationship between exercise and sleep exactly? So I think Andy is looking for some more specifics.
So it's using up energy essentially, but there's also, you have to think about other things. So it's really helpful for mood management. So for a lot of people, I know for myself, if I don't get some form of movement in, it makes me like feel more wound up at nighttime. And then I can't go to sleep as well because now I'm feeling more anxious or whatever it is that's going on. The other thing you want to think about is the timing of exercise. So exercise in the morning, during the day, it's fine. It doesn't do anything good or bad for your sleep. It's really about, if you're going to exercise in the morning, it's about the light exposure that's helpful, or turning all the lights on in the basement, whatever you can do. Exercise really can impact sleep at night though. So you're getting vigorous, especially vigorous exercise within 3 hours, that's raising your body temperature. Even though it's relaxing for the brain and body, or the brain, it's raising your body temperature, makes it harder to go to sleep. Remember, cooling off. You want a cool room.
Right.
Exercise within 3 hours is not we don't recommend it for vigorous exercise. But if you exercise, if you can, about 20 minutes, 4 to 6 hours before bed, what it does is it warms your body up. But then now you have a number of hours for it to cool off internally. So it helps to kind of push along that falling asleep process, because your body temperature is naturally dropping anyways. But 4 to 6 hours right before bed, it actually worsens sleep.
So is it fair to say then that the same principle kind of cuts across with things like caffeine and alcohol, because those both also raise your body temperature? I mean, caffeine is, raises more than just your temperature. But with all that action in your body, there is like a core temperature.
And for sure. And then the other thing too is that they in the middle of the night can cause a lot more awakenings too. So a lot of people think it's just the falling asleep issue, but it's actually the quality and the number of awakenings you're having.
Oh, that's brilliant. Do we have any other questions in the chat before we wrap up?
Oh, they mailed the test and instructions, but so I see that one. Like, what's my boyfriend has sleep apnea, so people have that, I guess.
Yeah. There it is. Okay, my partner's brother apparently sleep exercises. He does planks in the middle of the night, but doesn't remember what's up with that. What is up with that? How do you not wake up?
I haven't met the brother, but Sleepwalk, if it's actually sleepwalking, that's an interesting, the planks. I haven't heard that one.
I mean, you were actively going downstairs.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Is that they're sleepwalking is typically automatic behaviors that you do normally. So
Okay.
people will like fumble cooking, fumble driving. So if this person is doing planks and exercising, it could just be like that's what they're doing.
Yeah, his core must be just
exactly. Like I walked down to the kitchen because I went to the kitchen all the time. You know,
yeah,
I did every day.
What about sleep talking?
Yeah, it's a variation of sleepwalking. So,
Okay.
so they're all kind of like weird sleep talking, night terror, sleepwalking. They're all like, and sleep talking can also just be like speaking, but it could be like talking in another language, just making noises.
Oh, interesting.
But it's all a version of like sleepwalking disorder.
Yeah, someone told me one time I gave a speech while in my sleep. I think I said something like, there's an inner part of me that is a princess somewhere, and it was just trying to come out in my sleep. Is there kind of an order to the intensity, right? So you have sleep talking where it's talking, but it's not, you're not moving, you're not getting out of bed, and then sleepwalking. Like, is one better than the other?
I guess you would get in more trouble with sleepwalking because you could walk down the stairs, walk outside. Injury, I think, would happen more. I mean, there are plenty of people who are sleep talkers who it impacts their relationships with their families. They have significant others. They have to sleep. Yeah.
Like, you really thought about them.
Yeah. One thing I would say, if you're doing something in your sleep that you're like acting out a dream that you remember, or you're thrashing, you're like more violent, I definitely see a sleep specialist because that's a whole other type of sleepwalking disorder.
Yeah.
That's a little different. You want to make sure there's safety going on there too.
Okay. Well, I was about to wrap up, but we got one more. This will be the last one. If you could give one tip for people in college, what would it be? This is actually going to be my last question. So that's perfect.
Yeah.
If you could do more than one, yes, please.
One is, I know it's not, college, watch the alcohol intake. So that's the first thing. So I always say, even to people not in college, you're drinking, I say, like, make it the exception, not the norm.
Okay.
So focus on as many nights a week. If you're going to go to a party or something, maybe try to do that once a week. If that, don't make it 2 or 3 nights in a row, because then you're really sacrificing a lot of sleep. So watch the alcohol. Within 3 hours, you want to cut it off of your bedtime. So that, and then number 2 is, it's not always easy to do in college, but try to have some kind of window of consistency in your bedtime and wake time. Like, don't go to bed at 11 o'clock most weeknights and then stay up until 4 in the morning, 2 or 3 nights in a row. That is a lot harder for your body's rhythm. So try to kind of come up with something in between where it's not so jarring.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So we got some thoughts. If you could give, that was the same one. Okay. All right. Dr. Shelby, you've given us so much. I am so thankful for this. And I know you are the sleep doctor. This is a sleep awareness week. You get the least amount of sleep this week because you're getting pulled in different directions. Yeah. So we're going to let you go so you can go lie down. But thank you so much for joining us. Now, for those of you who are still here, or if you're watching a little later, content like this is created for you. And so we need your feedback. We want your questions, the topics you want to hear about. So in the app, which is live, by the way, it's live in California for people 13 to 25. In the app and in the profile settings, you can click submit feedback. We're actively paying attention to that. So please give us some more ideas. Tell us the things that you want to hear about, the kind of things you want to kiki about, the tea you want to hear. We're here to help to do life with you, to walk with you. We are having these live shows once a month. If you want to get to contribute to that, you can answer some questions that we have, like the poll that Dr. Shelby and I talked about earlier. We use those in our live shows. So actively, please answer the questions there. Give us your thoughts, your ideas. Okay. Thank you so much again, Dr. Shelby. And if you're still here, thank you for tuning in. Good to see you. Bye.